I'm Tarot Oracle, and we're back for more tarot symbology. We're getting through the swords, and the second half of the swords, definitely the most depressing. So, a lot of depressing cards today. Sorry in advance, but we do have the six swords today, and one of those things to where it has a lot of symbolism within it. So, the first thing you could notice is the fact that he's standing on uneven ground. So I always thought that was very interesting. We have the obviously symbology. So we'll go Captain Obvious here and say that this is a depressing card with a family that looks like they're having a lot of issues and they're making a journey, and the journey is definitely not a happy one. So a lot of problems with this card. One, the swords are obviously penetrating the bottom of the boat, I'm assuming, and yet it's not leaking, so it sort of stopped up its own leak, maybe, I'm not sure. But we do have, looks like, a family member and another family member, so an adult and a child on a journey, and they look obviously very depressed going through this area. So the first thing to notice is he's standing on uneven ground, which I always thought was interesting. So I think the message for that particular thing is sometimes the situation is not an even split of good or bad, or it's not even split of this and that. There's sort of an uneven ground or an uneven happening going on here that's causing part of the issue. The second thing is just how depressing not only the card overall is, but the journey to a land which is sort of in a grayscale of purplish blue, just like the water. So we have sort of this message of a combination of not only is it depressing here, but it looks to be depressing where they're going. And we have many instances of other cards, I'll grab one, where distant foliage is green, more distant foliage that's green, etc., etc., more distant foliage that's green. So we have many, many examples of basically green foliage, or something in the distance that has some hope or some positive outlook or anything else. But not only is the foreground depressing, but the background is depressing as well, as it goes to grayscale, bluish purple. So another interesting thing, so we have uneven ground. In other words, the situation is not balanced. We have some uneven situation going on, or something odd is going on with it. The second question you have to ask yourself is this a pole, or is this sort of a row or a paddle? So I always thought that it's a pole. Obviously, a paddle would be a bit shorter. In my opinion, it's a pole, meaning that he's pushing the boat through the water via putting the pole in, touching the bottom, and then sort of moving the boat along, meaning it's shallow water. So it's always an interesting point that I have found that I believe that is not a paddle, because I've never seen a paddle that long other than hanging out the side of a ship or something in a movie, but it looks like a pole, and it looks like they're on shallow water, and he's just sort of pushing the boat along into the depressing background as they move forward through there. So again, a couple of interesting things to look at with the six, and we have just a drastic difference with the other deck, which, by the way, is the Hanson Roberts, and this is the Universal Rider Waite, one of my favorite decks because it just has all sorts of good stuff. So in this particular one, it's just completely different. Notice the background is green foliage. It's got more of a positive type thing going on. The swords are more decorative, which is also interesting, and there's no passengers. The passenger appears to be the swords, which is totally different. Then you have this Viking style boat headed into the distance, etc., etc. But you do have the water, where they're paddling or pushing it along is obviously disturbed, but the left side is not. So that could mean that he's just constantly, that's another thing that sort of points me to the fact that it's one long pole, is because this side is disrupted water, but this side is not. If you're paddling, you're going to go left and then right, or left and then right. Otherwise, the boat is just going to constantly go to the opposite side, right? So again, I think he's pushing it, and I think that's why the water is disturbed. So drastic difference between the two decks, and that is the Six of Swords. And we continue along with the theft card. Something is getting stolen. So a lot of interesting things here. The first one to notice, obviously, I mean, is just, it's pretty obvious that he's stealing the swords, right? But the fascinating part about this is we have a linkage between the 7 and the 8. When I say linkage, I'm talking about this one sword here that has the hilt, I believe it's the hilt of the sword on the handle, is sort of lopsided. And I think this links these two cards together because you don't see that here, but you do see it in other cards. So let's look at the linkage, my linkage theory. Always an interesting video. The linkage theory. We don't have linkage within this particular card here, nor do we have linkage here, but we do have this damaged hilt, or this sort of off a little bit, 45-degree hilt here and here and here. So we're linking somehow the 7 and the 8 and the 10. Please leave your comments. I'd love to hear exactly why these particular cards are linked, but the other cards are not linked. What is common amongst these three cards? Please let me know. I would like to think that we have a theft. We have this sort of a karmic thing from the theft, and then we have a bad ending from the entire ordeal. It seems to be maybe, that style. In addition, we have the damaged hilt on the far left, but we have it offset by one here, but here it appears to be in the middle. So again, let me know what you think about my conspiracy theory about the linked hilt that's 45 degrees. So other than that, let's look at this card. So this particular card has, obviously this person is stealing and he's taking it. So obviously he is sneaking or being stealthy about it. The fascinating part is we clearly have a circus. And to me, he looks like part of the circus. His outfit, his hat, obviously is, decorative hat with the little fluffy things on the bottom there. He clearly, to me, was part of the circus. And when I see this card, and when I read with this card, by the way, my interpretation of that is you were part of something, but you're abandoning it. So it's not just theft, or it's not just stealing. You were part of something, but now you're giving it up and abandoning it and taking what you can as you leave. Does that make sense? He was there, he's leaving, and when he's leaving, he's taking what he can. It's like when you quit a really crappy job and you take one of their pens as you go out. I don't know. So he was part, now he's not a part, now he's leaving, and he's pretty happy about it. So that's one of the things when you're stealing. He's not depressed about it or anything else. He seems to be happy about it. And again, that's my conspiracy theory about the karmic reaction going later. But, obviously he's sneaking away, meaning to me that he wants to get out, not in a big way. A lot of times you'll leave a relationship and you give that speech about how screw you, I'm leaving, or, whatever you do in a relationship. And you leave and you're mad about it, but he's not mad about it. He's happy about it, and he's leaving stealthily or sneakily, and he's taking what he can, but he is abandoning what he had. And that's important in a lot of readings because you're in a situation where you're part of something. Maybe you're part of a relationship, maybe you're part of a job, maybe you're part of a community, a guild, and a video game, who knows. But you're leaving it, and you're happy about it. Not only that, but you're going to take what you can. So that's part of the reading when I do it, is notice that, and I'll ask the querent about what were you a part of that you're, abandoning it at this point. Not only with the theft, obviously. So there's a lot more meaning in here than just I'm stealing stuff. Anyway, that is the 7 of Swords. And now we come to part 2 of the sword conspiracy theory, which is going to be the 8. So what does this entail? Well, if you look at the 2, It is restricted. In other words, they are blindfolded, but they're clearly able to remove the blindfold. So it's a self-inflicted sort of restriction, in my opinion. But here you have maybe not so much a self-inflicted restriction. A couple of things to notice here. Obviously, the 45-degree hilt, but there is a background of mountains, which always means the troubles and all this stuff. And if you'll notice in many cards, you'll have a background of a city or something like that, and it's on level ground with the card, right? So you have a city that's on level ground, this is on level ground, so you don't need to climb, in other words, a year in order to reach it. But this one is way, way out of reach. In other words, getting home or getting back to normal is out of reach. It's going to require quite a bit of climbing or quite a bit of walking or whatever as you sort of scale up the mountain. So sort of the recovery from this is not going to be easy. It's going to be a scale up the mountain back home. Back home is not easily accessible. The second thing you'll notice that she does not have good footing or good, it looks like she's just going to step into a puddle, maybe take a header, straight down, who knows. It doesn't look like there's good footing. So there's not good footing ahead. Not only is there a climb ahead, there's not good footing. Ooh, maybe I'm hungry. There's not good footing to get there, right? So insufficient footing, a climb to get there. We have the bad combo, in addition to obviously being surrounded. If you're doing card interactions, we have a nice barrier here. In most cards, we have a good barrier of card interactions for this. You'll notice the same thing on, again, the Hanson Roberts, where she has a climb ahead of her, even if she escapes the bindings. And the Hanson Roberts, the bindings are fairly significant. They're rope instead of, maybe cloth. Maybe cloth would be easier to get out of. I don't know. Nobody's bound me up in rope nor cloth, so I don't know. But this looks a little more difficult. Looks a little better tied. In addition, it looks like maybe it's hooked to the sword. I don't know. It's just odd. Anyway, but again, we have a drastic difference between these two cards, and this is sort of blurred out. In other words, if you look at it in other cards, I mean, it's fairly clear that it's a castle, and it's fairly clear, but this one is sort of blurred out. You don't see the windows, at least I don't, when we look at it close. I don't see like windows or other features that we would see within other cards that are happier. Instead, we see this sort of blurred out vision of going back home. So poor footing, big challenges, all this other garbage, tied up, not able to do anything, head down in a depressive state, and obviously the conspiracy theory of Tarot Oracle, feel free to call it that, is the 45-degree offset hilt. Anyway, that is the 8 of Swords. And speaking of conspiracy theory, let's zoom in and find out what's going on at the bottom of this card. Let me get close. Is it going to focus? Focus, focus, focus. There we go. So what is going on at the bottom of that card? To me, it looks like someone is lunging forward with a sword and stabbing someone, and either that person is sitting or that person got knocked back. And then we have some sort of a pillar here. Anyway, it looks like an attack or a forward lunge, and someone is getting, not having a good day. So not only do we have the depression and the anxiety that we have of waking up from a bad dream, or, in case of my particular apartment, waking up because the neighbors are really loud and obnoxious, but I don't wake up looking like that, but, Anyway, waking up, having a bad dream, having a nightmare, and everything like that. And we have the roses on the quilt, and the roses obviously pointing to something a bit more positive, but that's not really being affected here because we have this negative thing. So it looks like that this particular person, Captain Obvious here, this particular person has a lot on their mind. So again, the 9, usually a good number in many of the suits. We have the 9 is very positive, but we have this sort of a linkage here with the nightmares or the eternal dreams or things like that. But sort of the bottom half of her is protected by sort of the quilt with the roses, And we see that theme a lot in many of these, to where the top is closed body language and the bottom is not. This is on a lot of cards. And it seems like we have this here as well, closed body language being holding her head from the nightmares or what have you. But the bottom is a little more positive, or not closed body language. So we have a repetition of this. So on here, we don't really have the protection of the rosed quilt. It looks like that things are a bit different, but again, covering your face, closed body language, etc., etc. So overall, obviously a negative card. Not a lot to do here, other than the person getting stabbed. Looks like being stabbed in the neck with someone lunging with a sword. So this could be related to the dream, could be about being attacked. But when you do use this card, in my opinion, definitely bring up, do you feel like you're being attacked? Do you feel like you're being maybe verbally attacked, or someone at work is, attacking you for doing this or that? Or in a relationship, do you feel that you're in combat? Just do they feel like they're being attacked? And that could be related to the lack of sleep, or the nightmares, or just the negative thoughts that are floating around. Anyway, that is the 9 of Swords. And finally, we have the best card in the deck. Well, not really. The 10 of Swords. So, not a lot to really point to here. We do have the 45-degree hilt. We have a bit of an offset hilt here, but not at the 45 degrees. So, one of those things to where maybe the sword is broken. Maybe you have brokenness. And it definitely does look like this is broken. So one of the things that I find interesting about this is we have 6 into the lower half and 4 into the upper half, as well as obviously it looks like a blood stain here, blood stain there, and not really much to work with on here. Obviously a dim cloud has sort of grown into the upper part of the card, blacking out literally the sunshiny good news that we have in some other cards. So you have that same type of yellow in the positive cards, and it looks like that is slowly getting turned into black and turned into a colorless thing. So we have the mountains in the background. Obviously, this person is not going to be climbing them, and that means challenges, but you kind of know it's challenges when you have 10 swords stabbed into your back. So, one of those things to where you got stabbed in the back, and maybe someone stabbed you in the back. When I do this, I always ask, is there somebody that's, that's sort of plotting against you, or do you feel that someone is plotting against you? And, a lot of times people say, well, have a couple of people doing this and that and what have you, but it seems to be someone plotting against you. The other thing that a lot of people use is overkill, because obviously this is overkill. I mean, you only need 1 sword, but you have 10. So this sort of points, again, for overkill, and that's another thing that I have, because a lot of times, let's say in a love relationship or something like that, you just went overboard, or you just did overkill. And that's one of the instances that I see within the 10 of Swords, but not really a lot here to draw upon. It looks pretty obvious, and it reads pretty obvious as well. And speaking of obvious, did you know I have a Patreon? What is that, you ask? That's where people give me a couple of bucks to say thank you for doing some of the series and help pay for expenses like the software that I use, etc., to do this. So my current Patreon supporters are Adam G, Alley Cat, Annie Lamaster, Brianna Santiago, Carmen Gabrieno, Carolyn Bouchard, Crystal McGinn, Daily Empress, Fatima, Galatia 9, Gary Fink, Hot Chocolate, Jessica Mante, John Foote, Kim Wilson, KSW, La Ami, Nee Flowers, Richard Zeh, Scott Miller, Shintaro Kuga, Sinai Zamora, and Trina Iraverio. Thank you so much for being my supporters. If you would like to join the crowd of people on the Patreon where we hang out and have fun, link in the description. And as always, please hit like and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate everybody watching this series. This is my most popular series I've done in quite some time. So I really appreciate you watching, and hopefully you learned something. And if you have different opinions about my conspiracy theory, let me know. Conspiracy theory comments. Thank you for watching. Bye.